Welcome to episode 167 of Nobody Special.
In this episode, we talk about the boys and boasting and weakness.
The Gospel Outpost presents Nobody Special. Hey everyone, welcome to Nobody Special, two Nobodies talking about the somebody who matters. I'm Danny, the host and Amazon Prime specialist of Nobody Special.
And I'm Caleb, you're the host of Nobody Special. This is a podcast where two generations of people talk about God, pop culture, politics, all while not taking any of it too seriously.
Hi, Caleb.
Hello.
Caleb, I want to talk about a little bit of our process in... shut up, text message. I want to talk a little bit about our process in... planning for shows. Now,
okay,
we do pop culture, politics, and everything in between.
Yes,
while not taking any of it too seriously.
Right.
So that means that sometimes we have to go digging for stories because sometimes it's a slow news week.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I've grown to appreciate.
Yeah, and sometimes it's too quick. Sometimes it's wow. There's 5 things that happened this week.
Yeah. But that's not been this.
Yeah, it has not been this
week, so I tend to check a few different places. I go to Fox News and CNN, and then, these, I actually enjoy putting these right next to each other.
Right.
It's different worlds, entirely different.
Worlds.
And then I'll go to places, the trending page on a YouTube, that has produced, I think, 2 to 3 of my angrier episodes because of the concept of me asking, why does this exist? Right. And not really having a good answer to that question.
Right. It's half the stuff on YouTube.
But why does it exist? Why do those 14-year-olds think they're being inspiring? Just be positive. Okay. All right. Because anyway, I'm not going to...
See how far that gets you in life, buddy.
I think I'm more just upset that I'm still punching up even though he's 14. Is because he has like 2.5 million subscribers on YouTube, and I'm just like, yeah, it's still punching up. I don't care if you're a child.
Right.
Anyway, that's a weird turn. And occasionally I'll go on Twitter and check the trending page, and I got to tell you, there was some news today.
Right.
Have you heard of this group called BTS?
BTS.
Uh-huh.
Behind the scenes?
That's what I thought. It's not. It's a Korean pop group.
Oh, I feel like I actually have heard of this.
And do you know what's going on with BTS right now?
No.
Me neither. Because although they had 7 of the top trending spots at the time I checked, couldn't be bothered. couldn't be bothered.
Yeah. Well,
they're a K-pop band.
K-pop!
And that's
the Casey Neistat.
All
YouTube,
I know about them.
You know, when they did the YouTube Rewind? And... Casey Neistat says K-pop like really cheesily, and it's just stuck in my head forever. Anytime someone says K-pop, I want to go
weird,
K-pop,
which is weird because they could have gotten someone from any of the K-pop bands to have said K-pop instead of Casey Neistat.
Well, they went to K-pop, but it was like they saw K-pop over there, and then it was like a transition. So he's like, "Oh my gosh, K-pop!" And you're like, "K-pop." You want me to do it again?
No, but go ahead if you want. If it's there and you got to get it out, then go for it.
Okay, maybe later in the episode.
Okay. Wow.
Erupt in K-pop.
If you can
erupt in K-pop.
Work that in, I'll be very impressed because I know what we're talking about. If you can work that in, I'll be very impressed.
I'll see what I can do.
So anyway, BTS. I want to talk about BTS. I wanted to talk about the fact that I know they're super popular and people are growing in K-pop and all this, and I have odd tastes in music. I really do. I acknowledge I do. Can't be bothered.
Wow.
Just can't be bothered.
I've never really listened to, really sat down and listened to K-pop because I honestly don't know what it is.
So BTS,
and I know for a fact I'm not going to like it because I just don't like a lot of pop.
Is a Asian Korean pop boy band.
Right. But it is a specific band, or is it like a genre?
K-pop?
Yeah.
That's a type of music, is Korean pop.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the band BTS, I hope
Korean
they're K-pop.
pop. So does North Korea have pop bands?
Yes, and everything is fine, and there's no problems in there whatsoever.
They're just talking about Kim Jong-un.
Right.
He's the best leader ever, except in Korean, of course.
Glorious leader, glorious leader, glorious leader. This is not a good thing we're doing. So,
if me and Danny don't come back next week, you know why.
We weren't killed by Kim Jong-un. So.
I'm a little bit scared now. Oh, gosh.
We do have, so from analytics, just because we're just peeling back the curtain on this episode, because I do check our analytics for countries and places that have pulled up our podcast, we have had someone in North Korea access our podcast.
Why?
And two people in Iraq before. I think so. Two people in Iraq. And to those guys, if you're still tuning into this podcast, I mean this from the bottom of my heart for a couple of things. One, stay strong. Two, you gotta find something else.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you have very few bandwidth opportunities. It's okay to go find
some valuable resources.
Something else, you know? Can you imagine you get 30 minutes on the internet and they've kind of like, all right, I've got the firewall down, and I'm gonna hear that guy talk about the kind of show on a Netflix that I don't get about the kid who has the horns, like
yeah.
Like, can you imagine? And you just pull that up and play through it, and you're like, oh no, that's not good.
That's great.
That'd be great. Anyway, if you're in one of those kind of circumstances, stay strong, and we love you.
Yes.
So
we love everyone too.
Yes, but specifically you guys in the middle of that. You know, whatever that is.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Well, Caleb, there are a few things going on. Speaking of random TV shows that we're talking about,
right?
Amazon Prime actually has a good show. I know, weird. And they're prepping for.
Are you ragging on Amazon Prime? What was that supposed to mean?
Name a good show on Amazon Prime other than the one we're talking about.
So we are talking about The Boys.
Save it. Build up the anticipation. Just
also,
rushing it.
Me and my old roommate watched this one. I can't remember the name of it, to be honest, but it was really good.
Speaking of my point, can't remember the name of it.
Not the point. Okay, that is not the point.
If I'm dating a girl and I come back and she's amazing, what's her name? Not a clue. Don't have a clue. I'm probably not in a deep committed relationship. I'm just saying understanding their name is absolutely part of it.
Okay. The Hunters.
Oh, Hunters, yeah.
Yeah. Hunters was really good.
It was all right.
Also, they've had some original movies that have been fantastic.
Talking shows.
Okay. Sorry, Dad.
Name a couple of shows they've done. I'll just name a couple shows.
I need to see some Amazon Primes.
No. You've got to name off the top of your head.
I disagree with that because my memory is... There's a bunch of... I've heard Yellowstone is good. Oh, it's not Amazon, though. Amazon Prime original shows. This is really interesting for our audio listeners.
And Google is asking why.
I have heard The Marvelous Miss Maisel is good.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard The Man in the High Castle is good.
Sure.
Jack Ryan, I've heard, is really good.
Yeah.
Honestly, I haven't watched any of those, but I disagree with your point. I think that they have some good stuff, and you're not crediting filmmakers
But no
enough.
one's watching it. Oh, not crediting filmmakers.
They're watching
enough.
it. I know tons of people that watch this stuff.
Not a lot.
Okay.
Amazon Prime is trying to break into the streaming service.
How many of your... I was about to make a really mean joke. Never mind. Moving on.
Go ahead. I'm prepared for this.
But it's also... I was thinking about myself too, so it kind of would have been a double burn. I'm not going to say it.
Amazon Prime isn't a Prime streaming kind of service that it wants to be. It's trying to break in there. It has some good originals, but overall, it's not getting the market on the hype. Okay. Except for a couple of shows, The Boys being a prime content of that. The Boys is actually doing fantastic. People are really excited about that, and they're prepping for season 3. And
now, if you don't know, The Boys is it's a little bit graphic sometimes, very graphic. I don't.
A lot of the times.
A lot of the times.
Incredibly graphic.
Let me just
a lot of the times.
swing the pendulum to
It's graphic.
to the maximum. Yeah, but I mean, it's also like just really good. Like the plot points and the way they end each episode, like you just want to watch more constantly.
So, what's the overall plot of The Boys?
Okay.
would you
without
say?
spoiling? Just like just show synopsis.
Just give me a 3,000. Yeah, show synopsis. Give me a 3,000-foot view.
So The Boys is very much like superhero movies you've seen, except not. So just imagine a world with superheroes where everything it's kind of honestly more realistic to what it would be in real life, in the sense that these superheroes are made to be like political icons almost, and it's really kind of like a corporate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's slightly political too.
Yeah.
And so there's these people with powers and not with powers. So the people with powers are kind of just like held with esteem, but also not at the same time. There's a lot of people who don't like them, and it's really just there's a lot of bad stuff going on. And so moral of the story, like this team of like nobodies who doesn't have superpowers is trying to undo a lot of the corrupt things this like team of superheroes. I think the easiest thing to compare it to is probably Justice League. Is like the similar vibe, but it's
I can see that. Yeah.
They're trying to undo the corrupt things that's going on that this company Vought that owns the superhero group is doing, and they're just kind of barely skimming their way through a lot of these things, and it's really interesting. It really is.
So it's essentially the superpowered people. They are pretty corrupt overall, and people are aspiring to be them, but that's because they don't know the details of all the dirty stuff they're doing.
Yeah.
And it includes things close to like laundering money, a murder, corruption, a whole bunch of stuff. And so they aren't as pure as people think, but still, they control politics, they control companies, they control these things because of the power dynamic and imbalance.
Right.
In this group of people who is starring Carl Urban, who has made it to season 3, I think. I'm not fully sure. The big Australian guy. Australian, New Zealander. And he's made it this far.
He's not Australian?
He's from New Zealand. I'm pretty sure he's from New Zealand.
He has an Australian accent.
Carl Urban. Anyway, he's made it this far and hasn't died.
Yeah.
New Zealand actor,
nice.
Which is very close to Australian.
But
you
probably recognize him from Lord of the Rings, if anything.
And 100 other things in which he died. So I'm actually cheering for him, just specific in this show, that he not die.
Well, I have some news for you, Dan. I'm just kidding.
He might.
I've watched the 2 seasons. Danny, how many have you watched? Episodes?
Almost one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good show. It's very graphic.
It's very dark. If you don't like dark and very violent and graphic things, then you shouldn't watch it. And be aware if you're someone who's sensitive to sometimes some sexual things, and that's not good for you to watch. I mean, it's really in excess not good for anyone to watch. But just watch yourself is my point. Watch yourself. Be intentional about assessing your own spiritual needs before you watch this show, for sure.
Yeah, I kind of scaled back off it, just not because I was like triggered or anything, and not just because I hate the word triggered, but triggered is a dumb word. Anyway, I don't know why that bothers me so much. I'm ironically triggered by the word triggered.
You are triggered.
But it's a very dark story. It's kind of the same cause that I didn't finish Jessica Jones, because it was too much. It was just too heavy, and I needed something to not be as heavy. Yeah. So I needed the fun stuff, the kind of I'm okay in dark plots, but you got to ease up every now and then, and this just never eased up. Kind of the same cause that I never got into Breaking Bad, because the first episode never stopped. It just was.
Me and Danny are very different in that sense.
And sad and got sadder, and then they did more sad things.
And Danny does not.
I do, but it was too heavy.
Was it?
I actually enjoyed dark stories, but this it was too heavy, and it just kept piling it on and piling it on and piling it on. I was like, I can't. I wasn't in a good place to like keep going, and I'm like, all right, I need something to lighten the mood a bit. There's a lot going on.
Like the Bible says, to hold every thought captive, also hold every show captive.
Yeah, I figured it wasn't instrumental to my social,
which is wise,
social upbringing. To like, I wasn't gonna miss out on conversations. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It was good though. I did enjoy it. It had some. See, even the comical parts were too heavy for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the first episode, the guy loses his girlfriend when the speedster guy runs through her and she explodes. And I was
really
like,
not funny, but it kind of is.
They were going for funny, but funny, and I was like, if this is the tone, and I made it through a few episodes, it never. You know, most of these, they tend to include a character that's there for comedic purposes, just to be like, "Whew, all right," in a quick break, just to have a quick chuckle, and then we'll go back in, and I'm okay on that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and that's kind of how the show kicks off too, and it really, I mean, we can explain it just because it gives insight to a lot of the show. Like one of the main characters, you're like just introduced to him at this point in the show. I think it's like the first episode. He's like saying something like really, he's like saying goodbye to his girlfriend, like she's about to just go home or something, and they're on like the side of the road, and then you just like see the speedster, and he's just like and just runs straight through her, and like blood like splatters everywhere. It's really grotesque.
Yeah.
And this show shows things. It does not shy away from like, oh, this wasn't on camera. Some CGI guys have some nightmares now.
Right.
But like, so this speedster's like, oh, sorry, and then just keeps on going. Like he basically doesn't even acknowledge it. And then the company bot like contacts this guy because obviously he's upset and like mourning his girlfriend, and they offer him like money to be quiet about it, and I think he takes it, but then he just like kind of gets really upset and wants to take them.
He was going to take it, then he's approached by Carl Urban,
right?
To like, we're gonna take down the boys. He doesn't say that. I just, in my head, he does.
The boys, they are the boys.
I know. I needed him to say it. I don't know, and he just never did. But I was like, all right, that's fine. But yeah, we're gonna take him down from the inside. And I don't know if they ever explain why he hates them so much, but he definitely does.
Yeah, they explain.
Okay.
The main, honestly, like the superhero group. It's just very corrupt and political, but the one who's like truly evil is like the Superman of this universe, because he's just kind of like untouchable, so he does whatever he wants.
Right.
And yeah, it's such an interesting show. It's just very, very interesting.
Oh yeah,
and feels very realistic.
Yeah, it's. So this is the other end of power to me. This is the other end of power, that people can get power, and if they abuse it, this is what it would come off as. If instead of getting the Cape Crusader coming down as kind of Superman, if we got this guy and he sucked, that'd be the way that plays out, because it's about keeping the power, keeping the influence, keeping all these things that tend to be pretty easy to kind of corrupt a person a bit.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things this program does the best is to display the corruptive nature of power.
Right.
All these people are striving to join this group of people. I mean, the main girl character is there to kind of, does keep powers, and it's about trying to keep their identity, but they're needing this girl to conform to a certain kind of an image, and give up integrity in a few things in order to keep the power. And that's a struggle this character goes through, is do I give up the person I am in order to keep the power, or do I stay the person I am in order to, and because of that, I give up all the power and influence? And it kind of pitches a good cost, I guess, of power.
Yeah. I mean, I think
I appreciate that a ton.
For sure. I think that, like Uncle Ben said, the wisest Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's honestly like just a very true a statement to life, which I love Spider-Man, so I'm just gotta bring him up. But like, it's very true. Like my classes in my school through high school, that was like a key thing that we always, like, through everything we were learning, like it all came back to like, with great power there has to be like great responsibility,
right?
Which for us Christians means something very different, and it means that like the only one with great power is God, and He is the only one who's able to be responsible with that power ultimately.
Yeah.
Now we may be given like little power here and there in life, but as far as like things that are superhero level,
well,
it takes a great amount of responsibility. And I don't know if there would be many good superheroes. I mean, I'm just speculating. If there would be many good superheroes if they did exist because of that.
I think they'd be complex just because there's people that do good stuff now, and I mean good by our standards, but like it's power is a tool, and it's just the person it's the person that carries the tool that determines what's done.
Right.
And just as there are people that are willing to go into burning buildings to save strangers, then I think if they had powers, there'd be a few people that they have good powers, well, not good powers, but they take their powers and employ them to good, and other people that take their powers and employ them to evil. And I think there'd be the whole gamut of this person's conflicted and trying to figure it out, and this person is Deadpool and not really sure if he wants to be good or not, but is having fun doing the bad things, but doing them to the bad people. So what do we do with that one?
Right.
I think it's just people that keep a tool. I think for us, I enjoy these kinds of stories because it gives us time to think through, okay, if I did, if this was a quality I kept, then how am I the kind of guy that's going to, I've got X-ray vision, so am I going to go and spy on the girls' locker room? That kind of age-old joke of like, oh, he's just spying on the girls' locker room. Or am I going to act in integrity? And I think for us, kind of the two things I've understood as far as, I guess it's kind of power, but kind of a leadership kind of a thing, which is kind of power. For sure. Is that there's two parts of it. There's authority and responsibility. And if I'm going to get the authority, I need to be willing to have the responsibility. Right. If a person is responsible towards a thing, but there's no authority, that's just a whipping boy. Right. And I've had a case that someone asked if I could be responsible but couldn't actually change anything, and I said no, because you're just gonna yell at me until I quit. But those that have authority and aren't willing to take responsibility are just tyrants. And the people in the boys are that they're tyrants. They want the power, the glamour, and the authority, but they don't actually take responsibility to any of their decisions. Right. And I think that's the more problematic part of them is that they can do great things, but they do it to their own end and their own glory in the process. Right.
Yeah. Which is very interesting. And I mean, it is, I think you brought up a good point on like, I think that there is circumstances where we have power as people, obviously. And have to decide what to do with it. And I think that the Bible talks a lot about that too, like being a good steward of everything that God gives you, whether that's power, money, all of these different things. And I think that it is good stewardship ultimately is being responsible. And I think that the only way that comes is through Jesus. I don't think it's sustainable from anywhere else to be a good steward and be responsible over something. I think you ultimately need that it has to be God inside you helping you with that. And that's why, like I said earlier, that God is the one who is responsible. Did I say that? God is the one who is responsible. Yeah. That was confusing, but it's true. And just like wisdom, I think that power is handed to us from God as well, and He places us in circumstances in life to hold things and to be responsible with them.
Mm-hmm.
whether that's a job, whether that's a kid, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's a wife. And it's just interesting to see how we tackle that as Christians.
Right. I think the big part is to these guys, they're boasting in their powers and their ability, and cultural, even our Western cultural understanding is kind of implied in that. It's all about trying to boast in the status I have, the power and influence I have, the amount of money I have, wealth, these kinds of things that are, people try and identify themselves as their worth comes out of these things, that they have status, money, and power. But in actuality, our value as a person doesn't come out of those things. And in fact, instead of boasting in our ability to perform, the Bible's actually pretty clear to do the other thing, to boast in your inability to perform in order that God can get the glory. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, 9 through 10, I think it makes that point the best. So Caleb, do you want to read through that?
But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong."
Mm-hmm. So this is Paul talking to the church in Corinth, and part of the thing that he's talking about is that the more weak that Paul is, the better a chance that God is glorified, because as people watch Paul do a thing that Paul is unable to do, then the only answer to that is to say, well, God is good because Paul is doing this, and it can't be Paul because he's bad at it. Right. Paul's talking about the thorn in the flesh, and gosh, I love that people will speculate very conclusively as to what that thorn in the flesh is. They're like, it's this, or he had lupus or something. I'm like, thorn in the flesh, people. That's all we got. Yep. Like, well, no, I heard he had this. Okay, chapter and verse, please. But all that to say is that there's a part of Paul that is creating a hindrance to basic kind of function or something. Right. And all it does is make Paul need to rely on God more and give God the glory, because in Paul's inability, God is clearly coming through. And if there's an opportunity that people can steal the glory to themselves, they'll tend to do that. But in actuality, even our strongest strength is weaker than God's smallest thing. Do you know what I mean? Right. It's like, so our goal then isn't to boast in our own ability, but in the ability of God, who is stronger than my inability. Yeah.
And the Bible brings this up in so many different points. I mean, there's also somewhere, I think it's somewhere in John, maybe chapter 8. I can't remember where, but the blind man. And the disciples and Christ walk up on this blind man, and I believe it's a blind man. And so he has some disability like that, and they're asking Jesus, like, what did his parents do that he may be, like, hindered like this,
Jesus, like, shut up.
Yeah. And
Stupid question.
He, like, tells him that this man, like, his parents didn't do anything. He has weakness so that, like, I may be glorified in that, even if you're never healed, even if that you struggle with that for the rest of your life, that, like, it is glorifying to God, that we may, whatever your weakness is, whether it's physical or mental, that it is and will be used to glorify God, right? If you are with Him, and it's just really cool to see. I just love how the Bible just flips what we know as culture, right, and what our culture celebrates. It just flips it upside down, and it's like just the opposite of it in a lot of ways.
And that's the countercultural understand, or the kind of difficult part is asking, is like, how do I boast in weakness?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like those terms don't mesh well. How do I boast in weakness? It doesn't make a lot of sense to do that until you understand that it comes down to which person is getting the glory. If I'm doing a thing and I'm able to power through and do it on my own,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm the star of that story. And
Right.
many people's testimony has been kind of the whole, and then I just pulled myself up and drug myself to church and I prayed my heart out until God took me in. I'm like, that's not how any of that works. Like, you didn't merit any of it. And so I think even going back to our moment of coming to Christ needs to be a testimony to the grace and the gospel that, yeah, I did everything in my power to avoid God and he still found me.
Right.
Like, that's a stronger testimony to the goodness and glory of God than I
Right.
think pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps. But
Yeah.
that's our temptation, is we don't want it to be as bad as it actually is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And this is something interesting too. I don't think it's what we were originally talking about, but when I think of this, I've thought a lot about in our modern church world,
Mm-hmm.
and how a lot of churches, I've just found it interesting that we tend to operate as businesses would, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, what are your thoughts on when you're like hiring someone, or you're looking for someone in leadership, like, how do you wrestle with like this verse, and then also looking through someone who's like qualified to do a job? Because that's something I've always thought about
Mm-hmm.
in like our
Right.
world today as a church. Like, how do we go about that? Like, are we having a lack of trust in God that someone can do something, and we're choosing these more qualified people over this person who maybe could have done it if God's power was perfected in them? Like, how do we view that?
No, I don't think so. As far as, there's like 800 different things in there, so I'm going to try and unpack them. There is an aspect that the church does need to function as an organization because it has a building and has employees. So there are things that you have to do partially to keep the IRS happy. I mean that is absolutely 100% a part of it, is that the IRS has to stay happy. Internal Revenue Service, the thing that takes your taxes.
Okay.
So there are things. IRS.
I thought you were saying something else. How did I hear? I heard ROS instead of IRS.
IRS, Internal Revenue Service.
The person that steals my money.
Yikes. So for, like, church councils. Church councils are there because the government makes us have them. That's it. They're there to approve the finances and have meeting minutes. I do not do good on those boards at all. I have a bad history with those boards, and I'm actually doing super well currently to not have a bad history with them. So, like,
Good job, Dan.
I know, right? I've grown. I don't know. But then even, I don't think it's a case of going, I need to bring in unqualified people so that God is glorified. I think that's an oversimplification, just because of all the times the Bible puts down qualifications for people that are like pastor. There are qualifications they need to have, but it's an expression of the Spirit that is in them and moving through them. If God is empowering a person to pastor, the first time they pastor isn't going to be after they come on staff. It's just going to be a thing that flows out of them.
Right.
It's going to be a natural outpouring of a thing that's in their their spiritual DNA, essentially. So, trying to tease that out. The part I check into is pride. If they're boasting in their own ability, like, I came in here and I led 100 people to the Lord, and or God forbid they drop the phrase, at this event I saved 300 people. No, you didn't. The Holy Spirit did that, and He can speak through donkeys. So, like, back up. you didn't save anyone.
Can we get that on a t-shirt?
It's scriptural.
That would be... I want that on a t-shirt.
I toned it down. There are t-shirts. They're a bit more explicit than I wanted to be on this podcast. But, I mean, God can speak through anything. So, like, you know, you didn't do anything here, Skipper.
Right.
So if they're coming in prideful, that's a real problem for me. And there has to be some kind of indication of they're able to progress past their own pride. Mm-hmm. And that's, to be honest, that is a struggle through the modern kind of ultra mega church pastor is pride. Mm-hmm. Because
for sure
the numbers get puffed up and big, and it's especially if they grow quickly, they're more prone to that, and that's kind of the cause of a lot of the stuff that's coming out now, and people are watching these big name pastors fall. I mean, Driscoll, Perry Noble, even you go back to Joshua Harris.
There was the other one too, Harvest Bible Church, something like that.
James McDonald.
Yes.
You know, all these people grew, but they grew because they were aggressive and prideful people. And
right.
I mean, there's even I was going to say, I'll save that for another one because I do want to talk about it at some point. There's been stuff coming out about Driscoll, which has got to be awkward for Driscoll, who is still pastoring a church right now, but whatever. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that on another episode. But these pastors that they've grown in bigness of church, but they haven't grown up into adulthood, essentially.
Right.
In out of that, there's this pride that came alongside that they think any person that disagrees is an enemy, you know, just that kind of stuff. Pride sure. takes down a person very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And God is still glorified in that, because even in a moment of weakness, God is still glorified. But
right.
To a lot of the pastors, it chews them up and spits them out in the process.
Right.
I mean, Perry Noble, I've been watching Perry's kind of steps through a few different things, and he's more broken. And he's trying to give off this kind of like, you know, air of keeping it together, but you can kind of tell he lost a step a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't even necessarily think that's a bad thing, but
right.
There is an aspect though of because the original question, sorry, it was about, does the church function as an organization? I think to an extent it needs to, but not at the expense of the gospel.
Right.
And there need to be qualified people to be able to do the things well. I just think it's a matter of asking, what are the important things?
I think one thing that God has been teaching me a lot is that he cares a lot about excellence in things. And that it is glorifying to him when we have excellence in the things we do and the way we present the gospel, the way, for me, like the way I formulate videos, like to not just do things flippantly. Is that a word?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
It's fun to say, so I wasn't sure if I made it up or not. And that, like, and I completely agree that there's I think it's a balance for sure.
Right.
Like we need to.
So I'm sorry to cut you off. The excellence thing, just you again don't like the word triggered. That's where we are.
Oh, did I trigger you?
You did. You hit a thing. Why do you think God enjoys excellence?
Why do I think he enjoys excellence?
Yes.
Because I think that
Danny plays his trap card face down on the deck. Sorry,
I think that God appreciates intentionality, and I think it goes back to being responsible with the gifts we were given, and to do things well, not for our own sake, but for the glory of God.
Right. I don't think it has anything to do on the output.
What does that mean?
As in, if I give $10,000 to church, and this other person gives $2 million to church, what person gave more?
person with $2 million.
Okay, let me put it in more context. I only have $20,000.
Okay.
This person is Jeff Bezos and has $1.9 billion or whatever he has right now.
Mm-hmm.
What person gave more?
Okay. Well, you questioned me, Danny.
Uh-huh.
I don't appreciate that.
I put the trap card. Well, that's scripture.
Well, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So I actually don't think it has to do with anything connected to the amount of output, because even our greatest works are as filthy rags, and we all know what that means.
No.
To God, it isn't that people that do better things by our standards are good. It's that they're doing the thing that they're able to do
For sure.
in an effort to worship God through their best ability.
I agree.
And if the only thing I can do is the equivalent of first grade math, and I give God first grade math, then God is glorified in that, because I'm giving it all the things I
believe
have.
that's excellence for sure. And I completely agree.
Yeah.
It's not. I think it's easy for us to judge outwardly on what things look like than
and
judging inwardly.
I've been in places that they tried to measure it off of essentially off the output instead of out of the heart.
Right.
That it was about trying to make things pretty and wealthy as a testimony to God's glory, but it's like, and they quoted the Queen of Sheba had a lot of money and all this.
Sheba.
I think that's it.
It's a fun word to say.
I'm probably getting
Sheba.
the story incorrect too, just because I heard them say it and I was like, oh, that is so wrong what you just said.
Right.
That excellence isn't about the amount of output. It's about the expression of the person outputting. So,
which is why it's important to, once again, like going back to what you said, like, is this person, I think it is like pride. Like, is this person proud of what they can do as far as worldly standards of what they think is good?
Right.
Or the standards of what they can give, what they can give. What is their maximum? And sure, like you said, if that looks like a first grade drawing, then that's their maximum. And you think that fits well for your church, then go for it. Like, that it's, just like what this verse says, that it's very inward, like these things, which is why, when I think about, why I asked that question, when I think about that is, like, as a church, are you more focused on your employees' hearts or what they can do? Yeah.
And I mean, this is a thing, because I do think there's a thing to that question, because there's even some churches that their hiring practices I disagree on, even though they kind of boast in them a bit. They've said, the Apostle Paul would never be able to get through our HR process. Okay, I get what they mean, but you're dumb then. Do you know what I mean? To say that and not have a problem saying that, Dan, I know who I'm talking about, and you're not dumb, and please come on this podcast. I love you. But to say that and not immediate go like, wait, we have a problem that a guy who authored 2/3 of the New Testament is not good enough to work at our church. That's just called pride. That is an issue. Or other standards there's a standard of to be a lead pastor at a church. Some churches, they've claimed that the lead pastor has to be married, which isn't a criteria in Scripture, that he must be, well, all right, it's married to but a wife, and I interpret that as maximum. It is okay to be unmarried, and I think they've over-applied that. So was Jesus Christ. I mean, like, so, and I don't appreciate that. Well, that's Jesus is different. Not if we're Christians. That just means little Christ, right? And I think creating this standard above and beyond the biblical standard of what it means to be a pastor is definitionally being a Pharisee.
Right, for sure.
It's so I do think there is a thing that you have to have qualified people in place to do the things they're called to do, but they need to be able to boast in not in their own ability, but in God's ability, and to not overextend and over apply to criteria. Now, granted, I can even understand if a church is going, hey, this is where the elders of the church, they feel the church is going towards, and we have to find a pastor to walk down that path. I'm even okay on that, but just at a point it gets ridiculous that they've over institutionalized this thing, or they're asking their pastor to be an organizational kind of a CEO instead of a pastor.
Right.
And that's the problem I have in kind of the criteria is if the pastor needs to have a business background, then I think you don't understand what it means to be a pastor.
Right. I kind of want to touch back to, I'm kind of jumping a little bit here, but back to when you were talking about all these fallen pastors and how...
Oh, I want to do a whole episode on that one.
Yeah, we can do a whole episode on that. But I find it interesting too, and I want to know your thoughts on like how we should view these pastors falling as Christians. Now, like, because in my mind, I look at that, everyone, like I see everyone around me who's like, oh no, that's bad. They should like never preach again. Blah, 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 blah. And just like a bunch of negative things when like, shouldn't we be, in a way, not, it's sad. Yes, it's sad, but in a way also like celebrating that like God has brought them, because I think that in my mind, it's almost a positive thing in a way. I'm trying to walk carefully here because it is kind of like sensitive still,
put these gloves on. Hold on. Let's go.
But that it's obviously not great that these things have occurred where they have to fall down in leadership.
Right.
But spiritually speaking, isn't it good that Christ has brought them down and humbled them again for their own relationship with Christ? I'd like to hear your pastor thoughts on this. Like, as far as you, if you got to that place and you were knocked down, and would you say it was good for you or bad for you in the long run? Ow.
I reject the premise of the question. So,
Danny,
the gospel, a person's right standing before, well, not even that, because that is in Christ. A person standing before God, it is more important than our professional job. So, if I am a drug addict that cannot escape the drug addictions, then I need to be taken out of my job, not as punishment, but as a means of, hey, because this job will push a person to continue in the sin, we care enough about them to take them out.
Right.
A good amount of these pastors, and we can definitely get into this more on another episode because I'm
next episode
super interested. Actually, yeah. And it is more important. I mean, even Ravi Zachariah.
I was gonna bring him up.
Yeah, I mean he got to a place where people wouldn't call him out on his stuff because of the fear of it would affect the organization.
Honestly, that's kind of my...
ask the hard questions to protect the business, but the idea is I need to be willing to, and this is partially why I don't get along on church councils or anything, because I hold this, that there's a point that you need to be okay throwing out all the cash and stability of an organization in order to do the godly thing. And the council is there specifically to not do that. And so there is a point that if the money becomes an idol, that they will protect the corrupt in order to maintain the idol.
Right.
That is what happened with Ravi,
which I find to
and
be
a few others.
Way more sad. That he had to die without getting to give that to God, or let that be. I mean, so it's sad to me that he had to die with that, and that these other pastors they honestly have the privilege that Christ would sanctify them further. Would you agree?
I would say they have the opportunity.
The opportunity.
For my stance on this is I do think some of them are able to come back to the pulpit, and others I would disqualify and say they have to do something else.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Or they're not ready to come back.
Demoted to serve staff.
No, because part of Catholicism that was actually good is that if a pastor went off the rails, this was before they just moved them around. Said it, don't care. Before they just moved them around, they would defrock a person. They didn't keep the ability to be pastoral, so they didn't keep their endorsement by the Catholic Church because they had the structure in place to keep that accountability. Now, there are pastors of non-denominational churches who are, for lack of a better word, excommunicated from their church, and they're phenomenal church planters. That's how they started.
Mm-hmm.
So they I'm just going to go plant another church.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're big names and special and stars,
yeah,
we follow them. And they just plant churches again and they try it again. And I think that the accountability isn't in place strong enough that they're able to not boast in their own ability, and they don't boast in their own weakness, but they boast in their own strength of, I had all these people coming after me and I powered through, praise the Lord for perseverance, and now we're still here.
Do you think it's possible for Christ to call someone to be a pastor and for that to be revoked? Or should it be revoked?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
What if they, after being sanctified through that experience, what if they still feel the call to be a pastor?
You're conflating two things, and this is the heart of the issue. Are they still a Christian? Absolutely. Are they pastoral? No. They are different. They are different processes, and there are some that you have disqualified yourself from coming back to the ministry, and that is fine. A guy marries 2 girls. Yeah. Hey, thanks, man, but you're out.
Yeah.
That's it for you. And I can't think of a circumstance that I would permit that person to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they kind of said, like, I'm going to divorce this girl. I'm like, all right, but like, you still kind of, like, there'd have to be a massive change that I'd be comfortable in that, just applying biblical standards too. The Bible talks about in a few different places of things being vessels for destruction, that sometimes God is glorified because he is able to display his justice and judgment. Mm-hmm. And that is a difficult thing. But I mean, even for talking about the super powered people, I think it's a case of, we try and create these binaries of people of they're either fully good guys or fully bad guys, and people are just a mix. And I do try and extend grace to pastors, just because, I mean, I'm harder on pastors than anybody else, but that's because I'm harder on them as one of them, and not as a person going, like, what the pastor needs to do is, and then mention whatever stance I have on COVID, and then getting upset if anything deviates from that. Hey guys, still chill about COVID with your pastor. He's tired. Like, so anyway,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, but to conflate calling and salvation, I think, as in professional calling, and do they lose their faith? I'd say no, but their professional calling, yeah, absolutely. I think that is a thing that can be taken from a person.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely.
What if God still wants him to be a pastor?
Okay, well then, what if God doesn't?
Yeah, but what if he does?
Right,
It
but
can go both ways.
It's a what if. I mean, the question is, can it be taken? Yeah, absolutely.
I guess like,
absolutely, it can be taken.
For sure. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Just always wondered, because I do feel like a lot of people do have a very harsh negative view towards these things.
Mm-hmm.
When honestly,
that's just Western cancel culture.
Right. And and I think it's definitely flooded its way into Christianity.
Screw up one time, you should be fired and tarred and feathered and never work again. I'm like, dude's 30, let him work again. He needs to eat. Like, let him get a job. People got to eat.
Right.
So, but I mean, there are some things, if I know a person is inclined towards them, that is an inclination they keep, that I'm not going to keep pushing them back in that. There are plenty of, Joshua Harris was a person who was not mature enough to be in the spotlight to the degree that he was, and they elevated him too fast, too quickly, and he broke because of that, and he wasn't able to have given his professional calling time to be mentored and worked through. I mean, dude was mid-20s as he was best-selling author and all this, and I know early 20s, it seems as if I know what I'm talking about. When the older that you get, the more you're like, oh, gosh darn idiot. Like I don't know anything now. So what do I think I knew when I was 25? And thank God I didn't become popular when I was 25, or in that I'm not popular now. I thank God for that, because 25-year-old me would have been a terrible pastor.
I agree.
Yikes.
Just kidding.
I mean, I would have been a terrible kind of a lead pastor. I've had to grow a lot between that time I started. Gosh, I think I was ordained at like 24, 25, somewhere around there. And now I've been doing this for over a decade, and I've grown a lot and have changed a lot.
Oh, it has been a decade.
Yeah.
Dude, time moves quick.
Yeah, man.
Wow.
Yeah. You were, what, 11 or 12 when I first met you?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I've been doing this a bit. But
That's
if I was
crazy.
the same person at the time I taught my first class, then God help me and everyone else I've come into contact with. So
Yeah.
I think there's been this ability to boast in God's ability to save people despite my best efforts,
And it's a tough like balance too, because a lot of like the way I operate is, or the industry I'm in, it feels like you need to be tip-top shape. You need to get things done, and you need to be able to do that. So I've just been wrestling with, and I think this applies more to people who aren't within like Christian jobs. Like if you're in a corporate job, like you, in a secular one at that, like it's going to be a tough battle for you trying to trust that God is in your weakness, and also when everyone's screaming at you that you need to be the one who is perfect in all the things you do. So it's tough,
right?
And it's not going to be easy, but
right.
My experience, my few years of knowing Jesus, like just trust him and he will come through. He will.
Yeah, I think it's a case of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego of staring at the king and saying, I know God can save me, and even if he doesn't, I'm still not going to do your dumb thing.
Right.
Which to me is one of the more baller things to have ever been said in the Bible, which Kidsman has been totally killing my favorite stories right now, so I'm super on top of it. Joshua talking to the angel of the Lord, it's like, are you for me or for them? And the angel's like, nope. That's my other favorite. And they've been hitting all my favorite quips, and I'm like, oh, I like it. Yeah. But it's this idea of, if I'm boasting in my inability and weakness, then I'm boasting in God. And so it's a murdering of the pride in order that God is glorified. And even if I'm in a job that isn't church-based job, but is a job, I boast in Christ and Christ's ability to do things, not in my own. And it's an appreciation of even the gifts I've been given come out of God, that I'm able to do anything
right
because of God. And
right.
Pride isn't just a thing pastors go through. Pride is, I think, the core of all sin is pride. I think as it comes down to it is thinking I can do better than God.
Right.
Take it back to the Garden of Eden. It was this idea that I know better than God. And so I think that's the bigger thing to keep in check is, am I building on my own ability and glory, or am I able and willing to give God the glory even during the times that I can't?
Right.
So, or even during the times that I can, that if I if I have the ability, even that I understand is given to me as a gift from God.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. And it's tough. It really is.
Absolutely.
But I would encourage everyone to include, I'm saying this to myself too, like really just spend time in realizing, searching through what your weakness is. And as long as it's something obviously that like you,
right.
It's like, if it's something you need to repent from,
right,
then do that.
Yeah, that's
but
not,
also,
that's not a weakness. That's
this is
my weakness is crack. Like, no, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Context is important.
But find what your weakness is and truly just give that to God and just spend at least a week. Go a week without seeking glory or approval from anyone else and try and just really flourish in what God has for you and how He.
A long one for that. Go a day.
Yeah,
start with the day.
That's true. And I promise you, it might be a shock at first because I think we as people can really just love compliments and taking the credit of things, but really just give that to God and see what happens. And I think that through small actions like that, like God is insanely glorified. Not to say that He's just that makes it sound like He's more glorified through that than other things, but it will glorify Him for sure. And I'm going to challenge myself to that too.
We'll definitely get into some of the more pastoral things.
Yeah.
You have to listen to podcasts, not ours, and I'll tell you about it. We'll talk about it next week also. But I would say it now, but I honestly don't remember the name of it. So,
what?
Huh?
What?
I don't remember the name of it, but there's a podcast you got to listen to for research, and then I'll get the name
one
of it.
talking about the church about Mark Driscoll.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll get it for you. It's good. I have thoughts on it, but we want to hear from you guys. Where's an area that you have to be able to trust God in and be able to boast in your weakness? These are really cool things to think about, that even though you may have an inability to do something, God is still gracious and God is still able to do all things, even through anyone. So let us know in the comments, and you can do that in a few different places. The first, by going to thegospelpostcom/nobodyspecial.
Yep.
It's a website. There's forms. Y'all know how it do and the thing that it be.
Yes. You can also go to Instagram and Facebook. Nobody Special Podcast is the name of our handle, and you can also ask us questions there, or say hello, or comment, or just follow us, whatever you want to do.
And finally, our podcast comes out on Tuesdays on YouTube, so you can go there, hit the bell, subscribe, do whatever else the Facebook algorithm tells us to do.
Facebook.
What'd I say?
Facebook.
YouTube.
Yep. There you go.
Whatever. It's the same media conglomerate. It's all one. Sorry, I was going to get really conspiracy theory in the last 30 seconds. It's all the New World Order taking over. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's not, but also kind of. Anyway, let's not get into that.
Okay, Danny's really just showing out right now.
This coffee cup is empty.
But that's going to do it for us today. I'm Caleb.
And I'm Danny.
And we are
Nobody Special.